Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you off of a 4-3 night. Is that what it was? It was a winning night, mostly thanks to the 2-0 in the NBA. A couple of easy wins in the NBA. The New York Knicks blowout win over the Orlando Magic and Sacramento Kings. Got a little bit dicey kind of towards the middle of the game, but they were able to turn it on again and have a nice finish to that game and win the game against the Houston Rockets. So 2-0, my NBA. Not doing too badly. What is not doing well is college basketball. I went 2-3 in college basketball, but I think I should have been at least 3-2, man. I mean, that UNH game was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like, they didn't score in the first, 11 minutes of the game, and they were losing 25-0. And I'm like, well, this game's dead. Then I look a little bit after that, and they're tied at 32 at halftime, and I'm like, don't give me hope, man. And then at that point, it's like they're actually going to cover, and they were covering in the final minute of the game. They were still down 2. I'm like, maybe this is going to hit, and they lost by 4, and it missed by a half point. So that was brutal. I mean, the other 2 losses were blowout losses in college basketball. I don't even remember what they won. Was the Louisville one. I forgot to mention Louisville. I don't even remember his name. One of their key players had just gotten injured in the prior game, but I didn't think it mattered that much. And if anything, I thought it meant injured player theory spot kind of, and they would step up a little bit. Louisville, the thing about Louisville is that they jack up a ton of threes, and their three-point percentage has been terrible so far this year. And it's something where I think it's going to have to progress to some sort of mean, but that did not happen last night. They shot horribly from three-point range again. And I think they actually might have won the rebound battle and had more free throws in the game, possibly, and they still didn't win because the three-point shooting in general was just so bad. And maybe I'm not giving Ole Miss as much credit as maybe I should with, what's his name? Chris Beard, is that his name, their coach there? He seems to be turning the program around. I mean, their defense has been pretty ugly the last couple of years, and maybe it's getting better under him because he is known as a better defensive coach, so whatever. And then what were my other college basketball plays today? I don't even remember. I would have to go look, but whatever the case was, it was just I don't know. The couple of plays that won, UNC Greensboro won, and Georgia was the other one that won. Georgia, that was a kind of crazy one where the game was low scoring, and whoever Georgia's opponent was, I forget who I even faded in that game, really didn't score a whole lot of points at all in that game. And then I forget what my other loss was. This should show me. I'm looking at, Tennessee Martin. I don't even understand that one, man. I mean, Charleston Southern, not a good team. So I don't know what to even think about that. Let's talk about today's slate, though. I'm done talking about yesterday. All right. Men's college basketball. I'm going to try to fly through the slate quickly. Baylor at UConn. I'll talk about all the ranked versus ranked matchups. There are a few. Baylor, number 15 against UConn, how the mighty have fallen down to number 25. I think we still don't even know how good UConn really is. I think it is possible that Baylor is indeed the better of these two teams. UConn is a 2.5-point favorite, so on the one hand, it's one of those games where the lesser-ranked team now is actually the favorite. So my first instinct is I want to look towards that team because the public's going to come in on the other team thinking, oh, the number 15 ranked team, they're the better team, right? And we're getting points with them. That must be value. Maybe they're not thinking that in this case, though, because it is still UConn, and everybody knows they're the returning champs, and maybe the rankings don't really maybe the public doesn't really pay attention to their ranking in this scenario here because it is UConn. I'm not really sure. But I think UConn has gone down from a 3.5-point favorite to a 2.5-point favorite. So I do think there is some actual money coming in on the Baylor side. UConn did have a bounce back win already after those ugly losses. Well, they lost to some good teams, though, and then losing to Dayton was the ugliest loss. Dayton's a pretty good team, but UConn should not be losing to Dayton by 20 points or whatever it was. And then UConn did have a win, I think, against Maryland Eastern Shore or something to kind of regain some momentum so that at least they do have that out of the way. So they broke that loss streak there. I don't know, because Colorado's not that impressive. Memphis is actually kind of on the uprise right now, but UConn did not actually lose to like world-beating teams there, so I don't know. So Baylor may indeed be the better team here. Baylor's faced a more difficult schedule, no doubt about that. Gonzaga, Arkansas, St. John's, Tennessee, and Baylor had a nice bounce back after that too, beating New Orleans. So Baylor, though, this is only their second true road game, and in their first true road game, it didn't go well, getting blasted by Gonzaga, but totally different scenario where Gonzaga speeds up the game. UConn certainly does not. UConn plays very, very slow, which is also the pace that Baylor likes to play. So completely different scenario here. So I'm not sure that I would disagree with the Baylor side here. It's down from 4 to 2.5 on Connecticut in that one. What else we got? I feel like I always say that. Just it's more of a time killer there. First play up, I'm going to play Furman, even though it looks very square. Furman -2.5. This is a fade of Florida Gulf Coast. No longer Dunk City, Florida Gulf Coast. I know they have a bad record. Furman has a pretty good record. Florida Gulf Coast actually has not faced that easy a schedule. Greensboro, TCU, Bonaventure, Drake, not easy games there, and they lost all of them. 3 of them in road games or non-home games, but here's the problem. This is why I'm going to play against them. The spot that they're in, they just beat FAU, man. Florida Atlantic, that's a big win for Florida Gulf Coast because that's an in-state bigger brother right now. As Florida Atlantic has been pretty good the last couple of years. We know they made the Final Four 2 years ago. Some of those guys are gone, obviously, but they're still Florida Atlantic. They made the tournament again last year. They're a 14.5-point favorite in this game, and Florida Gulf Coast was able to pull off the upset in this game and shot ridiculously, 52.2% from 3. Probably an outlier there. They're probably not going to continue to be able to shoot that crazy from 3, so they're coming off that huge upset. And yes, I know they're facing a Furman team that doesn't have a really good record and hasn't faced that difficult a schedule, and this is still the SoCon versus ASUN challenge here, so teams do want to step up and represent their conference, but still, I mean, is Florida Gulf Coast really going to consider this game to be bigger than upsetting FAU? And then they do have LSU up next too, so I'm not really sure that they will. Furman, I know they're coming off a loss to Kansas, but that was an ugly loss. When you lose by 30 points to anybody, I think you're going to want to bounce back from that. And Princeton, I don't really think is that much cause for a look ahead. I just think they're going to want to bounce back from being embarrassed in their previous games. So give me Furman in that one. Line's just sitting at 2.5. I understand it does look way too easy to take Furman based on the records here, so it's not something I would normally do, but the situation I just don't think is good for Florida Gulf Coast. So that's the first play up there. The next one is coming up right on the heels of that. I'm going to play Lehigh. This is money line -105 right now. You may be able to get +1 on Lehigh or +1.5. The line does seem to be moving actually against Lehigh, which kind of worries me a little bit. Monmouth has flipped from a 2-point dog to a 1-point favorite with juice, so I think you can get +1 at least on Lehigh right now. Might have to go look and see what the best numbers you can get on them. It's still basically picked a winner, but I don't really get the flip unless, it's a setup or something like that. Monmouth, I understand I'm also playing against another team with a really bad record in Monmouth, but their schedule has not been easy either. So I know I'm kind of going against what I tend to do in some cases as far as like looking at the strength of schedule. Monmouth, I mean, they lost to Michigan State. They lost to Rutgers, Wichita. Youngstown's pretty good. Stephen F. Austin isn't that bad. Pretty difficult schedule. Temple's actually not bad either. And then what did they do in their last game, though? This is why I'm going against Monmouth here, man. I mean, they're in a New Jersey sandwich right now. They're in a Jersey Italian sandwich here. They just beat Seton Hall, man, on the road, and they beat them by double digits as a 12.5-point underdog. So this is my MO, man. I'm fading teams off of big games. That's what I'm doing in every game that I have today. I have 5 college basketball plays here. Monmouth, that's a huge win for them. And yes, I understand that it gets that monkey off their back, and they finally get a win after they were winless during the entire season. But that is kind of a monumental win for Monmouth. A little bit of a tongue twister there. Beating an in-state big brother like Seton Hall, a Big East team that I know. Seton Hall is absolutely down this year. Seton Hall is definitely a beatable team this year. They're not going to make the tournament. They're probably in like the 100s in Ken Palm's rankings, but still a big deal for Monmouth to go into Seton Hall and beat them. Huge win there. Double-digit upset. Seton Hall also plays a lot of low-scoring, ugly, slow games, so that makes them more vulnerable as well, and they're really not that good a team. Seton Hall had terrible shooting percentages in this game, 35.8% from the field, 23.8% from three. I mean, that's just ugly. Again, kind of outliers there, not really sustainable. Monmouth shooting 47.6% from three, probably not really sustainable either. So Monmouth is coming off of that. They have to play a second straight road game in Pennsylvania against Lehigh, who's another team with an ugly record. Are they really going to pay attention to Lehigh? And who does Monmouth have up next? Princeton. So they're playing another New Jersey big brother right after this. I said this was a Jersey sandwich. I think that they might overlook Lehigh in a spot like this, man. I think it's a sandwich. I'm going to grab Lehigh. They are undefeated at home right now. They're 2-0 at home. Lehigh has kind of faced a difficult schedule as well. I mean, Northwestern, Georgetown seems to be kind of improving a little bit. Columbia looks really good this year so far. UCLA, I mean, not easy. And then they finally started playing better against weaker teams, and they finally got a Division I win. So talk about Monmouth getting their first win. Well, Lehigh just got their first win, and I was on Lehigh in that game against Marist, so that could help them get some momentum, and they're just staying at home here. Yes, I know they do have Dayton up next, but I think Lehigh at home, I think they'll still pay attention here. So I like Lehigh in that game. I think Monmouth has much more of a reason to be in a bad spot there and overlook their opponent. So give me Lehigh in that one, however you want to do it. Money line, plus the points, whatever. What else is up next here? I'm only going to talk about like the biggest games. Oh, and a ranked versus ranked. Guess what? I have a play in this one too. North Carolina -2. Maybe I'm not being selective enough, but I like this, man. This is one of the ones where you have number 20 ranked North Carolina against number 10 ranked Alabama, and North Carolina is laying points. Part of it is that they're at home. So yes, North Carolina, they have a big home court advantage, so they probably get 4 points for home court. So the odds makers are telling you that Alabama is still the better team. I don't disagree with that, but I do think North Carolina is underrated at 20. I think Alabama is probably about correctly ranked at the 10th best team right now. This is going to be a crazy game, man. These teams are almost mirror images of each other. It's just that Alabama is slightly better than North Carolina. Both teams are really good on offense, a little bit worse on defense, and they both play real fast. So that's what you're getting here. This is going to be probably a high-scoring game. And I like North Carolina to have a little bit of the edge at home and situationally, even though they are the slightly worse team. I think having the home court is going to help push them over the edge here. And the other thing motivationally here is this is revenge, baby. This is tournament revenge, because who eliminated North Carolina last year? Oh, yeah. North Carolina was the 1 seed in their region last year. And when I broke down that bracket, I said North Carolina was the weakest of the 1 seeds. I thought they were going to be the first to exit. I had them losing to Michigan State in my bracket in the second round last year, which that did not happen, although Michigan State did look good early in that game. North Carolina lost the next game to Alabama, so this is revenge for North Carolina, man. They were the 1 seed in the region. They lost to Alabama, the 4 seed in the Sweet 16 round of the tournament. I think North Carolina is going to have this game circled for that reason. And look what Alabama's coming off of, man. They played a crazy stretch, which, yes, I know they're definitely battle-tested, playing Purdue, Illinois, Houston, winning the last 2 of those. Rutgers, I mean, that was the game where I played Rutgers because that was kind of a letdown spot after beating Houston. Houston beats you up, man, so you do tend to want to fade teams after they play Houston. But then Alabama kind of bounced back from Rutgers, but Oregon played a really nice game. And if you remember, I had it on Saturday night when I was doing my NFL show. I think it was Saturday night, right? It was either Friday or Saturday night. I forget which. During one of my football shows, I had the game on it. Alabama lost. This was the championship game of whatever that tournament was, the Players Era in Las Vegas, and Oregon beat them by 2 in overtime. Great performance from Oregon in that game. And we can, a little bit of a preview of another game I'm going to have tonight. But Alabama, that ended their win streak. And now they have to go out on the road. And Alabama, they're 0-1 on the road so far. Man, they lost at Purdue. Although I know Purdue is a total style contrast. Purdue likes to slow the game down. Although that game wasn't exactly slow, but Purdue does contrast in styles with Alabama. UNC does not, so North Carolina is going to want to play fast, which Alabama also wants to play fast. So that's not going to be a disadvantage really for Alabama, but I still think the spot is coming off that grueling tournament like that and now having to play only their second road game of the season in a very hostile environment, probably more hostile than Purdue. I mean, this is one of the craziest places to have to play in basketball, man. It's North Carolina. It's Chapel Hill. So, and North Carolina with revenge, I think, puts it over the top. And you're seeing North Carolina, ugly record of 4-3, where Alabama's 6-2. Although, remember, 0-1 on the road. North Carolina's 2-0 at home. I know the ACC did real bad yesterday, so maybe North Carolina wants to step it up even further to represent. The only ACC team that won all night last night, I think, was Clemson, which, by the way, I had right. I am pissed that I didn't play that game. I mentioned it on my show yesterday. I said I liked Clemson. I thought Kentucky was ranked too high at this point at 4. Clemson likes to ugly up the game at home. Clemson, nice win for Clemson, man. Look to fade Clemson maybe in their next game, but, man, that was I wish I played it. I called it. I was pretty confident in that one. Sometimes, man, I get in my own head a little bit and don't play these games, but North Carolina, they're on a 2-game losing streak, man, but look at what they did. So they're also battle-tested. Their only losses are no shame in these losses, losing to Kansas by 3, Auburn by 13. Auburn, maybe the best team in the country. Ken Pom actually has them as number 1 in the country right now and the number 1 offense, which I'll talk about Auburn in a little bit because they are playing tonight as well. And then I think maybe North Carolina was hung over a little bit after that. And I mentioned I liked Michigan State in this game because, as I just mentioned, this is crazy that these games are all grouped together like this. North Carolina beat Michigan State in the tournament last year and lost to Alabama. So that was revenge for Michigan State for that tournament loss to North Carolina. And now North Carolina has tournament revenge after losing in a game where their opponent had tournament revenge against them. They're now playing the team that beat them in the next round of the tournament, Alabama. So I think we're going to get a lot of reversals here with these tournament revenge games. I think North Carolina is going to bounce back here. They're obviously going to focus on this game. It's one of the biggest matchups of the night. Big ESPN game. ESPN's going to be in Chapel Hill. Huge game. I think it's actually probably bigger for North Carolina than it is for Alabama. Give me the Tar Heels in that one. -2. Tar Heels, not a good name for them right now because you think of running through sticky tar and being slow and slowing the pace down, and that is the opposite of what both of those teams do, including North Carolina. So that's how I go with that game. Marquette, Iowa State, I do not have a play in this one, but this is number 5 versus number 6. This is a big matchup, man. And Iowa State, I think they're actually undervalued right now. I think Ken Pom might actually have Iowa State as the number 1 defense in the country right now. Let me see. I would have to go look. Let me look real quick, actually. Ken Pom has Iowa State way up there, man. He has them 7th in the country. Oh, no, excuse me. He has them 13th in defense. What was I thinking? He has Duke number 1, actually. I don't know what I was thinking with that, but he does have Iowa State ranked ahead of Marquette by 2 ranking slots, 7 versus 9, according to him. He actually has Marquette as the better defense, and Iowa State as the better offense. That just is strange to me because Iowa State last year, I mean, they were known as the grinding defense, not quite as good on offense, slow pace. Seems like Iowa State is not quite the same this year, although, they play a little bit faster. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens in this game, but both of these teams actually like to play somewhat fast this time. So this could be another kind of fast-paced game here. Iowa State's the lesser-ranked team, but as Ken Pom is telling you, and as the odds makers are telling you, they're actually the better of these two teams. So I kind of lean that way just because when you see an odds disparity versus what the rankings are, I tend to look that way. Iowa State's sitting at a 6-point favorite, although down a little bit to reduce juice. But I think the public probably is going to want to take Marquette in this game. I mean, Marquette kind of is the better name brand, name recognition there. Marquette has been one of the top teams in basketball for a while, but remember, they don't have Tyler Kolek anymore and whatever. But Iowa State, because they were that grinding defensive team, they never really had that name recognition that Marquette does. People are going to look and see, Marquette's number 5, Iowa State's number 6, and you're giving me 6 points with Marquette. I think that's going to look very tempting to the public, so I actually would lean to the Iowa State side in this one. I know Iowa State has not faced that difficult a schedule, but they came to within 2 of Auburn in their biggest game, so Iowa State is actually a good team, beating Dayton. Pretty good win there, actually. And then I had Iowa State in this game against Colorado. Colorado was in the letdown off of beating UConn. Colorado really not that good a team, and Iowa State was able to get a pretty easy win there. So they're coming off of that. Marquette, I forget what they're coming off. Marquette is undefeated as well, by the way. So that's the public's going to want to be on Marquette for that reason, too. Wait, the undefeated team is getting 6 points against, I think Iowa State has that one loss, right, that I just mentioned. So, again, an undefeated, higher-ranked team getting 6 points is going to look very tempting to the public. Marquette's not coming off of anything important either. A couple of easy wins against Stonehill in Western Carolina. They do have Wisconsin up in 3 days, though, which is a big in-state rivalry game, and that's going to be a huge game with both of these teams ranked really high, too. I'm not saying Marquette's going to overlook Iowa State, though, because this is also a big game. I mean, it doesn't say that it's televised, although it must be, right? It's on ESPN+, so that game kind of gets a shaft job. Interesting, though. It's going to be one of the better games, I think, of the night. I'll mention Memphis. They're up to 16th in the country. I think they're a little bit overrated now. I think they're kind of riding a high off of that win over UConn. They did also beat Michigan State. San Francisco's a pretty nice win, too. Missouri and UNLV, I mean, those aren't horrible wins either, really. And Ohio's not even that bad. So Memphis has faced a difficult schedule. Finally lost their first game of the season to Auburn, though. So that is a type of game that could potentially hang them over a little bit, and maybe Memphis is a little bit overrated at this point. Meanwhile, Louisiana Tech not playing badly so far, sitting at 7-1, although they face a much easier schedule than Memphis, of course. Memphis, no doubt, they're the better team, but Memphis is coming off a loss to Auburn, which is a big step-up, grueling game. And look at what Louisiana Tech is coming off of. I think they got caught looking ahead to Memphis, man. They lost to Southern University, a SWAC team who's below 500. Louisiana Tech was a 15.5-point favorite, and they lost that game. That's a horrific loss, man. Again, I think they didn't pay attention to Southern. I think they got caught looking ahead, so I think they're in a bounce-back spot after that. When you have a team like that as a favorite, they just play horribly and lose the game like that, yeah, I would want to look that way, and I think Memphis is a little bit overrated. Memphis is up from 9.5 to 12 in this game. Oddsmakers kind of telling you that Memphis laying 12 at home, it's not a huge price there, so they are kind of telling you that Louisiana Tech's not that bad a team there. So at the very least, even though I know it looks like the money has come in a little bit on the Memphis side, it's going to give you a little bit more value if you like the Louisiana Tech side, and I do lean that way. Kansas and Creighton is a pretty big game. Creighton just fell from the rankings. I think Creighton is not a top 25 team this year. I mean, they lost Baylor Shireman. I know they started the season ranked, but I think the preseason rankings didn't really have Creighton correct. Kansas has not even played a road game yet this season, so could be a little bit difficult for them. I thought Kansas might be in a difficult spot after beating Duke, but they still played pretty well and crushed Furman, so Kansas is off to a good start. I think being ranked number 1, I think is a little bit overrating them. I don't think they're actually the number 1 team. I think they're somewhere in the top 10, however. But first road game of the season, man, this may not be that easy for them to have to go into Creighton. Creighton sitting there at 5-3 could be a little bit overlooked. I mean, their 3 losses are to Nebraska, San Diego State, and A&M. Those teams are not bad teams. So, I mean, they're not great losses, but they were able to bounce back and beat Notre Dame in their last game to break that losing momentum at the very least. So I'm not sure that I don't like the Creighton side in this one. And Kansas as the number 1 team, that looks very easy to take Kansas or lay the points with them. They're down from 4.5 to 4 with juice. Looks like a little bit of money might be coming in on the Creighton side, but Kansas is the number 1 team against an unranked, only laying 4.5. Does look kind of too easy to lay the points with Kansas there, man. So I would be wary of Kansas there. I would not want to lay the points with Kansas. Next game up is another one of my games, Minnesota +5. I'm running through these, trying to be a little bit efficient here. I'm going to fade Michigan State. I just mentioned what they're off of, man. Michigan State, I know they're a pretty good team. I mean, Michigan State's always a pretty good team, and they always face a pretty difficult schedule at the start of the season because Tom Izzo intentionally requests good opponents. So this is actually kind of a weaker early season schedule than what you usually see them play because Tom Izzo likes them to play a gauntlet early on because he wants to battle test his team. He doesn't really care, man. He doesn't care about being that high in the rankings. He wants to make the tournament and then play well from then on. And that's why you see Michigan State a lot of times be kind of undervalued going into the tournament because they face such a gauntlet during the season. They're very battle tested and they do well in the tournament. That's the Tom Izzo MO. I do like it. It's one of the reasons why I kind of like Michigan State. From a bettor's perspective, Michigan State tends to be undervalued a lot because of that. So their losses this year to Kansas, no shame in that. Memphis, I mean, we just saw Memphis is playing pretty well, although I don't think they're actually a top 25 team. They're probably about a top 35 or so team. And then they beat North Carolina in their most recent game. That is why I'm going against them. And it is their first true road game of the season, man. Michigan State has not faced a true road game yet, and they're coming off not only a huge win against North Carolina. I mean, it's always a big win when you beat North Carolina, but North Carolina is highly ranked. That knocked North Carolina down, I think, too far in the rankings, and that was tournament revenge, as I mentioned, because UNC was the team that knocked out Michigan State. So Michigan State's coming off that, having to face their first true road game, even though I know this is the start of Big Ten play. I mean, that's a big deal for both teams. This is on the Big Ten Network, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a bigger deal for Minnesota, man. Because Minnesota, I mean, they haven't been that good for a while. They have one of the big guys in their conference, Michigan State, coming into their place for their, I believe, their Big Ten opener as well. I think Minnesota's going to step it up in this game. And the other thing I like about this is you're taking points with the home team here in Minnesota. This is probably going to be an ugly game. Both of these teams like to play slower. So Michigan State still won that game, even though North Carolina was able to speed them up. Michigan State still won that game, but Michigan State and Minnesota both like to play defense. They both have pretty good defenses. I know Minnesota's offense is pretty bad, which is why they're not that good a team. They're down in like the 90s in KenPom's rankings. I think Michigan State's in the 30s. So no doubt Michigan State is the better team. They're laying points on the road for a reason. But I think in this spot, it makes sense to take Minnesota. Maybe the line on Michigan State's a little bit too high here. And like I said, when you're taking points with a home team and it's a defensive battle like this, and Minnesota especially likes to play really ugly, low-scoring games, and Michigan State kind of does as well. That's kind of a recipe for an underdog to cover as well when the points mean a little bit more. So give me Minnesota in this one, man. And Minnesota, I mean, their record is actually decent to start the season, but they have not faced a difficult schedule. Michigan State certainly has faced the more difficult schedule. Minnesota, I mean, they've been competitive at least. Wichita and Wake, those aren't terrible teams, and Minnesota hung in both of those games. Those were low-scoring games. I know they lost to North Texas, too. North Texas, actually not that bad a team either. I mentioned the line in that game was indicating that North Texas is actually better than Minnesota. So, I mean, Minnesota, I mean, their schedule hasn't exactly been easy either. I mean, Yale's not that bad either, and though Yale cost me that money the other night, but I think this is going to be a big game for Minnesota, man. So give me Minnesota plus the points in that spot. It's up from 4 to 5 right now. I don't know if we'll be able to get a little bit of a better line than that, but I mean, you could potentially wait and see if it's going to even start approaching 7. I mean, I kind of doubt it. I mean, that would be a big move, but 7 is the key number in basketball because it is the 3-score threshold. But any amount of points in this range, it makes sense to try to get whatever the best number is you can. I mean, it always makes sense to do that, but you know what I mean. Let's keep going here. Try to get through. We're down in the late games now, so we can get through this. A couple of the biggest games are in some of these late slates here. Maybe the biggest game of the night is Auburn and Duke. I mean, these are, in KenPom's rankings, this is number 1 against number 4, I think, Auburn and Duke. In the rankings from the pollsters here, Auburn is number 2 and Duke is number 9. So Duke is actually being a little bit undervalued still in the rankings. When does that ever happen? I mentioned that when I played Duke against Kansas, I think, and I know it didn't win, but I thought Duke was undervalued there. I still think they're a little bit undervalued. I mean, they're a defensive team. They don't play, like, terrific offense, really. They slow the pace down, so they play ugly style. So even though they are Duke, they are a name brand. Teams that play that style just tend to get overlooked a little bit. I do think Auburn's the better team. Duke is only laying like 2 or 2.5 in this game, so the odds makers are telling you Auburn is the better team, but it's not by that much. Both of these teams are really good on both sides of the ball, man. Duke likes to play slower than Auburn does, though, so I think the pacing contrast might be the difference in this game. I think Duke having the number 1 defense in the country, actually, as I mentioned, according to KenPom right now, Auburn's certainly also good defensively, but Auburn is actually the number one offense in the country according to KenPom right now. So this is a real collision here, man. And I tend to like the better defense in high-profile games like this, especially when you're not laying that many points. You're only laying like a bucket here with Duke. Duke being the team that's lesser ranked in laying points is also something that's going to catch my attention. So I do lean to the Duke side in this one a little bit. I mean, both teams are going to show up for this game. It's a big game, but also, again, because Auburn likes to play a little bit faster and Duke likes to slow the pace down and has the better defense, that's the way I'm going to look more often than not. And Auburn also has not faced a true road game yet, and their first road game of the season is going to have to be to go and play in Duke, in Durham, North Carolina. That's not an easy place to play, man. Just like North Carolina. North Carolina is the basketball state. UNC and Duke probably have the two biggest home court advantages, maybe in any sport, or home advantages in any sport. Man. So it's not an easy spot. This could be Auburn's first loss here. Duke is 4-0 at home already. Auburn hasn't played on the road yet. Duke's sitting at 5-2, looking a little bit less than they actually are. I think losing to Kentucky and Kansas, I mean, those are pretty good teams. I think Duke is actually better than both of those teams, so maybe they should have won those games. They could have won both of those games. They lost money on the Kansas one. What can you do? Duke bounced back and smashed Seattle after that to kind of get some new like winning momentum to come into this game. As I said, I like Duke in this one. They're down from 3.5 to 2.5, so it's like, well, you just get a little bit more line value if you do like that side, which I do in that one. And then Pitt and Mississippi State is interesting because you got a number 18 ranked Pitt against Mississippi State, who's unranked. Mississippi State is definitely a good team, and the odds makers, this line, man, Mississippi State's up from 3 to 5.5 with juice. So this is one of those spots that was a huge moneymaker last year, but I don't want to play this one because I think the books, they know that when you had a situation where you had a ranked road team last year and they were the underdog against an unranked home favorite, that was cashing at like a 67% clip throughout like 2/3 of the season last year. So I think the odds makers had to start adjusting for it and moving the line because of it. And I think now they're moving the line too much. So I really don't think there's line value on Mississippi State at this point, as tempting as it is to jump in on a line like that, because it just looks so crazy to have Mississippi State being a 5.5-point favorite as an unranked against a ranked Pitt team. But in this case, I actually don't think the line is justified. KenPom has Pitt actually higher than what they're ranked in the rankings, which is why I played them against Wisconsin. I thought Pitt was flying under the radar. Pitt is definitely good this year. They're on the upswing again. Pitt is actually, like, I think 14th or 15th in KenPom's rankings right now. And Mississippi State, I think, is in the 20-something range. So both of these teams are actually pretty good. They're both actually underrated right now. And KenPom has Pitt ranked higher than Mississippi State. So he has Mississippi State only winning this game by like 1 or 2 points. So that 5.5 is definitely not giving you line value according to KenPom, even though his rankings might be a little bit off. But Pitt they are coming off a nice win in their first road game of the season. They went in and beat Ohio State, coming off that battle against Wisconsin where they blew the game. I lost on that game on Pitt. Pitt bounced back and beat Ohio State on the road. Nice bounce back win for them in kind of a tough spot. Big win, and now that gets a road game out of the way too. So now this is not going to be their first true road game. This is going to be their second true road game. This is SEC ACC challenge where the ACC did real bad yesterday, so maybe Pitt will have a little bit extra motivation for that reason, just like I said with North Carolina. But Mississippi State, they're coming off their first loss of the season, so you might say, well, that might hang them over, right? Because, excuse me, when you have that first loss, you lose that winning momentum. You're rolling along. That first loss can kind of hang you over a little bit, but I don't think they're going to overlook Pitt here, man. And because that was a loss to Butler, and Butler's not really that great, Mississippi State was definitely a favorite in that game of 8.5. So I think Mississippi State's going to be pissed off about that loss and actually being a bounce-back spot here. So situationally, I do like Mississippi State. And if they were laying like somewhere around 2.5 or 3, which is where the opener was, I would be considering Mississippi State very strongly. But at 5.5, close to 6, I can't do it. I don't think there's line value there anymore. Mississippi State has faced a weaker schedule than Pitt as well. Not by a whole lot, but I don't know if we know how good Utah, SMU, and UNLV really are. Butler seems to be improving as well this year, but that's the breakdown of that game. And then to finish it out here, we'll talk about the last game I have on deck, right? Where's it at? Oh, I'll talk about two games real quick. Man, I got to get out of here, too. And I still have to talk about NBA and NHL, though those are small slates. My last game is USC +6, plus the points here. Oregon ranked 12th in the country. I think it's gone too far in Oregon now, man. I think they're in a letdown spot. They're definitely good. They're improving, but these rankings makers, they just overreact to what they saw last. The bettors then also overreact to what they saw last. Oregon, they're certainly a good team, but I think they're probably in somewhere in like the 20s range right now. I think 12 is overranking them a little bit. And look at the win they're coming off of against Alabama, which was also the championship game in that Players Era tournament. Went into overtime on Saturday. I think they're in a letdown spot here, man. And they're only facing their second true road game of the season. In their first, they kind of struggled against an inferior Oregon State team. So that doesn't look that great for them as well. This is going to be a tough environment to have to go to USC. So I don't love it for Oregon. I think they're in a letdown spot. I think maybe they're laying a couple too many points here. I don't know what Ken Pom has the line at here, but I am assuming it's right around in the ballpark of where the number is. But Oregon, I mean, they beat Texas A&M in that tournament too, and San Diego State, who looks pretty good again this year as well. As they beat Houston, so they can't really be that bad. But beating Alabama to win that tournament as well, that's a huge win for both of those reasons. Now coming off of that, USC, who hasn't been very good recently, and then who do they have up next? Oh yeah, UCLA, who's a one-loss team and a huge name in basketball, obviously. So I think this is a sandwich spot. I think they might be looking ahead to UCLA, and they might overlook USC for both of those reasons. USC sitting at 5-3, not off to a very good start. I mean, their losses are to Cal, blowout, ugly, horrific-looking loss to St. Mary's. St. Mary's is good. I mean, Cal, not really so much, but such an ugly loss. And then New Mexico, they played a little bit more competitively, only losing by 10, but USC has more time off than Oregon does. Oregon played that game on Saturday. I think Saturday. USC played on Friday, so they have a little bit of extra time off. That was also in one of those preseason tournaments, which they lost the last two games in the Acrisure. What are they? They must be insurance, right? Acrisure tournament in Palm Springs, California. So they're not even traveling. I mean, they're just staying in California. So Oregon not traveling that far either from Las Vegas. So neither team really has a whole lot of travel here. But having extra time off might help USC kind of break that losing momentum they have there. So I expect USC to really show up in this game. This is their biggest game of the season so far. Give me USC plus the points. Oregon, I wish I got it earlier because they're down from 7.5 to 6 with juice. You might be able to get 6.5. Actually, it's possible if you wait, it might actually even get back to 7. I don't know. We'll see. But take whatever the best number is that you can. I don't know that it will get back to 7. That is a key number in basketball, though, as I keep saying. So USC is the play there. The market does look like it's in agreement with that one. I don't know about the rest of mine. And then San Diego State, as I mentioned, they just beat Houston. I mean, that was a huge overtime win in that same tournament there. So they're in a letdown spot coming off of that game, having to go to Fresno. San Diego State also plays really slow, and Fresno, I think, is number 1 in the country in tempo. Fresno, they're not a good team, but they do like to run real fast. So San Diego State, they are the better defensive team, but they're laying 14 points on the road. So I would only look to take the points with Fresno there. It is a letdown spot for San Diego and San Diego State. They're ranked 24th now, by the way, after they beat Houston. I mean, maybe they're a little bit overranked from that. And this is their first road game of the season as well. And they do have a San Diego battle up next against San Diego. That game means way more to San Diego than San Diego State, as San Diego State's been the dominant presence in that city for forever, pretty much. So they maybe don't care about that game that much. But I think they're, at the very least, in a letdown spot coming off that Houston game. Huge win for San Diego State. So I would only look to take the points there. Let's get this done quick, man. Let's go to hockey. I have one play in hockey, and I will just point out Bruins, my Bruins, I think they're in a bad spot. They had an overtime game last night, so they're on a back-to-back. They're playing better after the fired coach with Sacco there. Now they're 5-2, but down in this game from minus 165 to minus 141 with 67% of the tickets, 57% of the cash on them. So it looks like the line is moving against them, and some of it is because they're on the back-to-back. They're not well rested here. They went into overtime last night. Decent win against an okay Red Wings team, I guess. Chicago has had a day off coming into this one, so Chicago is in the better spot here. So that would be the way I would look in that game. I'm not playing it, but the game I am playing is one of the only other games on tap, and I am taking a shot with a bad team as a moneyline underdog here in Anaheim. Vegas is down from minus 175 to minus 166. 56% of the tickets, 59% of the cash right now, but I don't know if they're actually going to have more of the cash than the tickets with the way that this line is moving. We see it moving against them, and I don't think it's a good spot for Vegas, which is why I'm fading them. I think they're in a letdown spot here. I mean, they have a good record right now. They're rolling right now. They're in a back-to-back, although they did have a lot of time off before that, so they're not going to be totally unrested here, but in a back-to-back off of a win over Edmonton, that's a big win, man. Edmonton, the team that won the conference last year, obviously. They've beaten Edmonton twice now this season, but that's still a big win. Now they have to go on this one-game road trip to Anaheim. I mean, it's not a huge travel spot just coming from Vegas, but having to play Anaheim, are they really going to pay attention to Anaheim, who's just been bad? They just beat Anaheim there in Anaheim on November 13th, so they've already played Anaheim on the road and beaten them. They beat them at home early in the season, too, so I think they're going to overlook Anaheim. Edmonton was a bigger game, and look what they have up next on Friday. The Dallas Stars, one of the best teams in the West as well. Then Winnipeg, Edmonton, Minnesota, Vancouver. All these games are way bigger than this game against Anaheim. This is a weird sandwich spot here, man. So give me Anaheim with the underdog price here. Anaheim, I mean, they're at least going to show up for a game like this against Vegas. They're the more rested team. They have 2 days off. They're staying at home. They got a win in their last game in a shootout against Ottawa. So at the very least, that might just be a kind of a confidence-building win coming into this game. I mean, this is a game where Anaheim should have full focus, and they're more rested, whereas Vegas, like I said, they're in a sandwich spot where they could very easily overlook Anaheim in that spot. So give me that, and then NBA to finish this out. I don't even know if I really want to talk about any of these other games here besides the game that I'm on. None of these other games are even really that interesting, so I'll give you the game I'm on, and for time's sake, then get out of here. I know I'm playing on a team in a back-to-back this time. Nobody's even watching. We have 0 viewers, so very sad. Give me the LA Clippers here. I know they're down from 3.5 to 2.5 now with juice. Maybe you can get 3 on them. I think the T-Wolves are in the worst spot than the Clippers are, even though the Clippers are in a back-to-back. 63% of the tickets, 61% of the cash on the T-Wolves. So the line, the market does appear to be indicating against the T-Wolves. Even though they have the worst record, they are actually public. So a lot of times they'll say, wait a minute, the team with the worst record is laying points on the road. So the odds makers are telling you, despite having the worst record and being a 500 team, the T-Wolves are actually the better team. But the public knows they're the better team, man. I mean, they were one of the best teams in the West last year. I think that exchange of Karl-Anthony Towns for Randall, I don't think it helps them, man. I think Randall's a defensive liability. I think they haven't really built that total chemistry with him yet. So I think that was actually bad for them, and the Knicks seem like they're starting to roll now with KAT there. I think that was a downgrade for the T-Wolves, in my opinion, and an upgrade for the Knicks. T-Wolves are still the better team. The odds makers are telling you this, but I think the spot is bad, and I think the public is not dissuaded by the records here. The Clippers just get overlooked, man. So even though they're sitting at 14-9, public doesn't even seem to care here. But also, what did the public just see last? Well, Minnesota just beat LeBron 2 nights ago on Monday, and now they're starting a road trip. I know starting a road trip usually your focus, but when you just beat LeBron, not only did they beat LeBron, but who did they beat the game before that? Oh yeah, the same Clippers team. So they just beat this Clippers team, and then they beat LeBron and beat him bad. They crushed the Lakers by 29 points in this game. They're going to be feeling real high after that. And the Lakers shot terribly in this game, 19.4 from three-point percentage. LeBron was out there air-mailing threes. I thought LeBron wasn't even going to play in that game. I thought he was going to get a rest game in that game because he's way too old, and he looked awful in that game. Just way too old. He could not hit anything. The Lakers could not hit anything. That's an outlier percentage, man. I mean, the Clippers are not going to be doing something like that here, okay? They're not as old as LeBron. Minnesota also shot 42.9% from three. Lakers had 21 turnovers. I mean, you're probably not going to see the Clippers have that many turnovers at home. This is just a disgusting, bad game for the Lakers. I think the Lakers are a little bit overrated, too. Now, Minnesota, yes, they're starting a road trip, but they're playing a Clippers team they just beat. And who do they have up next on Friday? 2 games in a row. They face the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry. That is a bigger matchup, man. As much as LA has a good record, I think Minnesota's not going to care about this game for all those reasons. The Clippers, yes, they're on a back-to-back. I know, a third game in 4 days, but at least they're not traveling. All these games are at home, and I know beating Denver was a big game. So they're actually in a bad spot, sandwiched in between Denver and Minnesota. They had a home game against Portland. And what did they do? No sweat. Easy win last night. So even though, yes, the Clippers did play last night, they showed me something because they actually played a good game in a bad spot, and they just won easily. So they didn't really have to put in a lot of effort in this game against a pretty weak Portland team. Didn't matter. The game was over. They might have put in some reserves late in that game. I don't know if they did, but hopefully they did. So that mitigates the back-to-back a little bit when you have an easy win in that first game and you can rest some of your best players and get ready for the next game. So I don't think the back-to-back is as bad in a scenario like this. So give me the Clippers for all those reasons, and that is it. That's going to do it for me, man. My plays one more time. College basketball, Furman -2.5. Lehigh, money line -105. North Carolina -2. Minnesota +5. USC +6. NBA Clippers +2.5. And NHL Anaheim +150. That's going to do it for me. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow the Tower Gang podcast, patreon.com/Tower Gang. Live pre-show, post-show. Hang out with us in a Telegram, and we'll be on tonight talking about probably the Destiny Nick Fuentes video tonight, 9:11 p.m. Tower Gang, baby. It's Tower Night. Have a good one, and I will see you guys then if you're going to watch it. Peace out.